the last one standing. Two hands in the air, I'm a champion.
Hey guys, where is Pixie now? I'm in my home in Charleston, South Carolina, and thank you so much for joining me for episode number 20. I can hardly believe it. Of Spiritually Speaking with Pixie Paula in this amazing podcast and video segment that we've been running now for over 20 weeks. How exciting it has been. And this is like round one here of everything we're doing on Spiritually Speaking. And I'm really delighted. You know how I love my numbers. So for episode number 20, to be able to open up the recording with my dearest friend, Laura Dixon. And I've been waiting all week long to have this conversation because I know that it is going to be spoofy great and
Yeah.
spoofy great. Like, as we're in the fall time celebrating Halloween and spiritually speaking, of course, we move into the spirit of the holidays and the inspiration of everything that happens during the holidays. Along with the cold, I'm freezing today in our 51 degree. It's getting down to like 33 or something tonight. So I'm already prepared. It's cold in my house. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I'm amped.
Okay, so you know what? I have to ask a question. Where are you originally from? I don't think I know that. I probably do.
I am from Summerville, South Carolina. So
Oh,
if you're from Charleston, I'm from Summerville. If you're not from Charleston, I'm from Charleston. That's always what I tell people.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. Okay, so we've got a history now over the couple of years that we've been together, and we got introduced from the comedy scene, which
Yes.
I absolutely love. But you are so much more than a comedian. I've come to know you as a beautiful, first of all, a beautiful heart and soul. And thank you so much for jumping in and helping me in all my crises and emergencies because I can't do it without you. And we were introduced through Robin Phoenix, who's also been on the show. And
Mhm.
one of my dearests, like we're like three musketeers going on here, and I love that
I know.
happens. But you are also an actress and a model and so many other things. So let's just like dive right into there. You have free reign to talk about the things that you want to talk about. And the reason we jive is because we love metaphysics and consciousness and I say pixie magic, right? You have your
Yes.
own kind of magic that I really want to learn about. So jump right in and let's start. Like, first of all, what was your first like career choice? Was that modeling?
No, actually, when I was really young, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer or go into forensics. Like I wanted to be like a forensic analyst or a forensic psychologist. And for years, I wanted to be Elle Woods. I wanted to go into criminal law. And then once I got older, I think probably around the time I was like 17, 18, fashion was kind of like my backup. But I had always loved fashion. Like other little girls I remember would be like playing with their Barbies and everything. And I had like a computer game where I would like design Barbie clothes. And that was all I cared about was just like making their clothes. It's like, I don't care about like what happens. I just want them to like look pretty. And my aunt's a fashion designer. So that was how I got into that. I worked in the fashion industry for a few years. And then I had mental health problems for a long time. And then I had a nervous breakdown and exited the industry. Worked in food and bev as I kind of like rebuilt everything. And during that time, also went to cosmetology school. Really just walked around bumping into things for most of my 20s.
That's a common thing though that I
Yeah.
hear about people actually the pressure of being in the fashion space is just too overwhelming.
Yeah, I think it's very overwhelming. It's not so much like this anymore, but 10 years ago, um, there was a distinct falseness to it that I couldn't handle. Um, and I couldn't handle the facade I needed to keep up and I wasn't very far up in it at all. You know what I mean? But there was a lot that came with it that it eventually just didn't sit right with me.
Sure.
Which, and again, it's not so much that way anymore. I think the progression that the fashion industry has made in the last 10 years is
Yes.
amazing, amazing. And certainly not the fashion industry that I grew up with, which is, I think, a really good thing. But then, once I met you, I was working for a party boat, which was a job I stumbled into because of comedy and acting. And then one thing just sort of led to another. And here we are. I'm a writer and a comedian and an actress and just do all sorts of stuff. I'm kind of all over the place and still working a little bit for the party boat. So there you go.
That's interesting, which is why you're just such a great host and bartender. Thank you very much for filling in for me in a pinch.
Yeah.
Okay, so you move out of fashion, you move into comedy, and now, like you
Hmm.
said, writing and you're acting.
Hmm.
And what is it like being in comedy? I've been watching some of the behind the scenes shows on Netflix, and
Hmm.
it's overwhelming, like what we see as an audience in the stage area versus what actually happens to go on to performance.
Hmm.
Pretty night and day.
Yeah. Um, I would say the biggest difference is a lot of comedians, we're telling a lot of jokes on stage. Obviously, it's our job to make people laugh. But a lot of the comedians that I know are they're very emotional people. Um, it's really like a dysfunctional family, but in like the most interesting way, because you're talking about people who have this common goal to make others laugh. And a lot of times that goal comes from a deep sense of either pain, let's say pain, marginalization, or maybe even just a simple feeling of not fitting into the world. It's almost an island of misfit toys, which is really good in some ways. It's really good in a lot of ways. It provides a sense of community. Um, and,
I was hearing that in these specials, and then they talked about like great comedians like Robin Williams and others that have come from this space of that's everything they have, and they're giving of their deepest soul from usually, I mean, we all, let's face it, as human beings have some kind of trauma that happened to us that, right, we're overcoming and we're trying to manage, and that's why be on the journey if you're not going to go through these life lessons of learning how to have challenges and overcome. But to
mhm,
step into the limelight to make people laugh and laugh at you and constantly be working towards healing through
mhm,
comedy. Robin made a lot of those comments too that, with the Best Medicine Brigade, it's about healing PTSD problems through comedy and especially focusing on our veterans for all of those reasons. So I think
mhm,
that you're right that, it drives some kind of common sense of if I can get a laugh and I'm laughing at myself, right? There's also some healing and some bigger giving that's coming out of and vulnerability, right? Exposure and
yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to touch on too. That was part of the reason that Robin and I jive so much with Best Medicine Brigade, because it does have the goal of healing, and that was part of the reason why I started doing comedy. I, I there was a mutual parting of the ways, I like to say, from this job that just had taken over my whole life, and I really started thinking about how can I take what I've been through and the journey that I've been on, which is incredibly intense, and something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But how can I take that and transmute that pain that I felt throughout my life, and how can I transmute it into something beautiful that can help others, or maybe just make somebody not feel so alone.
Yeah.
One one of the best things that I can get outside of a laugh is somebody coming up to me after the show and saying, I really resonate with a lot of what you said, because I do talk about things on stage. I talk about having borderline personality disorder. It is not a secret, baby. We talk. I am very open about that, and some of the things I've gone through with that. With having borderline personality disorder, with struggling with my sexuality when I was younger, and not realizing that I was bisexual and that other people didn't have these feelings. That was news to me, and that was a weird thing to be this Southern Belle sorority type, but also a rock and roller who's like, oh wait, I also like girls, but I can't tell anybody because of like some of the implications of that.
Right.
Also, it's 2009 and nobody's talking about it yet.
Exactly.
Um, and to have people come up to me and say, like, you really made me feel less alone today. You made me feel like I wasn't so weird today. You made me be able to laugh and look at this situation in a different way. That's like the best feeling in the world for me. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I
Well,
don't know if
thank you
that's
for
a
being
question.
so open. No, it's the
Yeah.
same here too. So you're right. Look at what a difference a decade and a half makes, right? But with
Hmm.
being able to talk about these issues, they don't today, they're like, there's still concerns and taboos and issues, right? But they're
Right.
people are much more educated. And so
Hmm.
they're less biased and critical because they have a better understanding about these things. But
Yeah.
yeah, growing that had to be really, really tough. And so, well, kudos to you for coming out of this with a last laugh
Yeah.
and
Literally.
using comedy to heal that. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
it does, it points to everybody like just no matter what, right? You find what your lot in life is and you turn it into something positive and you wait long enough. And I guess
Hmm.
that's that old saying, and this too shall pass, right? Time heals all wounds.
Hmm.
So that's amazing. And you've been successful at every step of the way, and you are an inspiration to all of us. So let's talk about where you're drawing your inspiration because
Yeah.
do you really feel like you're struggling with the identification or the labeling of borderline personality, or do you think it's because you really are tuning into so many things? Let's talk about that.
Um, for me, my thing is I used to look at it as like, oh, I am borderline, right? That was like it was sort of this thing looming over me. And then two things made me change my mind surrounding that, right? Number one, started saying, I have borderline personality disorder. I just have it, right? Number two, radical acceptance. And I think this is so incredibly important when there are things in your life that you can't change. You can change a lot of things in your life, but there's certain things that you can't change. And for me, I have a personality disorder, right? I can go to therapy, I can do all the things I'm supposed to do, whatever, but I can't change that I have a personality disorder. And I can only learn to live with it. And I explained it to somebody recently as kind of being like the Babadook, which if you've never seen the Babadook, it's this horror movie that came out in 2014. It's an Australian horror movie that really is about kind of radical acceptance. And the Babadook is this monster that lives in the house and it's terrorizing this family. And at the end of the film, sorry if you're going to watch it later, but spoiler alert, the Babadook they wrangle it and it goes and lives in the basement and they just learn to live with this monster in their house and they learn to live with the monster in peace. And it's fine. And everybody kind of lives, it's not a happy ending per se, right? Just like it's not a happy ending for me to say, okay, I have this personality disorder. Um, but it's an acceptance. And I think that's so important to just accept the things that we can't change and be able to say, like, that's fine.
Sure. So for our listeners
Mhm.
and me included, that if I don't really understand what is a personality disorder without it being a label, how do
Mhm.
you what does it mean to you?
Um, so borderline personality disorder, if we want to be specific, there's all sorts of different types of
Sure.
personality disorders. Um, Borderline is the one that obviously I know the most about, right? And borderline specifically relates to emotional dysregulation. Now, there's good and bad that comes with that. Okay. The good is that when I am happy, things are amazing. They're an 11 out of 10. I get to experience joy, happiness, euphoria that other people cannot experience. And that's wonderful, right? That's a beautiful thing. I get to experience love at a deeper level than most people are able to. Um, and that's a wonderful thing. The flip side of that, obviously, there are two sides to every coin. The flip side of that is I experience sadness, a deep sense of sadness, a profound sadness. Um, again, at a much deeper level than other people, I experience rage at small things, which thank God for anger management programs, right? Because that's made all the difference too. Um, but experiencing rage, experiencing extreme sadness. And the problem with borderline is not so much the range of emotions, but the fact that they can happen on a dime. So the smallest thing could set off a rage episode. The smallest thing can, create this happiness out of nowhere. Um, and this also, there's a lot of other nuances to it, but that's kind of the overarching thing of it. And borderline comes from childhood trauma and a distinct sense of wanting to avoid abandonment at all costs and going
Sure.
to really extreme measures to avoid any sort of real or perceived abandonment. So, and then of course there are substance abuse issues that come along with that, disordered eating, all sorts of things. So,
So
yeah.
I would think that it's probably quite common given the amount of trauma that occurs that now we're much more present to, right? With social media and people being more vocal, the Me Too movements, all
Mhm,
of these opportunities for sharing people's childhood traumas.
mhm.
Are there good support groups or, as you mentioned, mechanisms or learning tools that you've had to adapt to be able to monitor your own behavior and emotional feeling good, right?
Um, Interestingly, with borderline, it's very highly stigmatized, and it is relatively common. It affects approximately 1% of the population. Women are diagnosed about 3 times more than men. Um, and I'm not really sure why that number occurs, or what, I'm not a psychologist, so I can only tell you what I've read about it. But there are some good online support group type things. Um, but a lot of therapists will not work with borderline patients. Um, it is also not able to be treated with medication. You can treat the symptoms, but you can't treat the personality disorder. It's not like depression or um, schizophrenia, not to downplay either one of those things,
Sure.
but borderline has to go through something called dialectical behavioral therapy, which is completely different than traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. And there's a lot of other moving parts to this therapy. So if you can get access to the resources, there are people who will help you and who really want to help you. And the therapists who care really, really, really care. Um, but the community, the support community for borderline specifically is not as large as you would think.
Interesting. So
Mhm.
do you think that comedy has been your choice for healing and remedy for management? Does that help a lot?
I think it's one part of it. I think comedy is definitely helpful in terms of helping me look at the bigger picture and
Yes.
what can we find in this that is a universal human experience, that we can all relate to. What can we find to laugh at in this? Like, I think back to some of the things I did when I was younger, and I'm like, it's not good that these things happened, but my God, can't we have a laugh at this? I tell a joke on stage about finding out I had borderline personality disorder and then going and looking up celebrities who have borderline personality disorder. And that's a real thing that happened. I was sitting in my sorority house scrolling the internet. I was like, first of all, and actually I was hospitalized for the first time and got that diagnosis Thanksgiving of 2010. I think I've told the joke it's 2009, but it was 2010. So 12 years ago, almost exactly. And I remember coming back and sitting in the sorority house. My roommate Allison is like up in her bed watching me scroll through and just like naming celebrities who have this. She's like, when is this going to end? And commenting on each
Yeah.
one. I was like, okay, great. Britney Spears. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, Lindsay Lohan, they think she has it. That's great. I love her. Let's keep going. Jeffrey Dahmer. Shit. Like, so,
Yeah,
um, but
I
I
could
think,
see that.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, so what you mentioned a minute ago, like looking at the bigger picture. So
Yeah.
what are the things you look at in the bigger picture? We talk a little bit about our connection with, you know, consciousness and
Mhm.
how the universe actually works. So
Yeah.
how have you explored spirituality to be able to make sense of your navel?
Well, everybody strap in for this. I grew up in a religious home. I grew up Methodist, and I left the church at 17 of my own accord, which in hindsight is such a huge decision for a teenager to make, like consciously, not like, oh, I don't want to be a good person, but like this religion is not right for me. That's unhinged to make that decision at that age, right? Um, I studied Buddhism for a while, and now I am Wiccan.
Oh,
I can, yeah, I converted to Wicca when I was 25, and it was one of those things that just, excuse me, 24. It was in 2015, so I was 24, and it it found me. I always tell people Wicca finds you, right? Like nobody wakes up and is like, I'm going to be Wiccan now. Like I'm going to be a witch because I'm Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and it's going to be like Charmed. It's going to be great. That's not what it is.
or
Um,
like Harry Potter.
or
Like
like Harry Potter. Yeah,
yeah, everybody
yeah,
wants in, even
yeah.
Disney.
You're right.
Yeah.
I,
So I love this whole thing. I'm
yeah.
fascinated with it. So it finds
Yes.
you,
Yes.
right? Okay, great. And you start to resonate with the fact that I make the joke. My joke is, well, I'm a good witch, so I don't melt in the rain. Right. So it's like if it's raining, I'm like, I'll do it. I'm a good witch. And they're like, what? I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't melt in the rain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about Wicca that people don't realize is it holds you to such a high standard. Um, Wicca holds me to a higher level of accountability and a higher standard for how I conduct myself than anything else in my life has. Um, which is, it sounds weird to say, but there's a few moving parts to that. Um, one, the first thing I was ever taught about Wicca was one, we don't mess with black magic. There is no putting hexes on people and blah, blah, blah. It exists, but I am not allowed to touch it. Right. Um, the other piece of that, um, that a lot of people don't necessarily recognize is one of the first things I did was actually talk to my pastor I had growing up. Um, his name is Dr. Howell. He is a brilliant man. Um, there, I, there are just some people who are so flippin' smart, and he is one of them. And one of the first conversations I had with somebody about it was with him. My mom called him, he called me. He was like, let's talk about this, dude. This is the real stuff. He talked to me about demonology and dark energies and things that you can let in when you start messing with that kind of stuff. And I think that was a really important and pivotal conversation, um, in how I continued to conduct myself and what I was learning. Um,
Hmm.
there's
It's fascinating. For me, I've been doing automatic writing since I was
Yeah.
in fourth grade, right? And I've been listening to what I said is the voice of God since I was two, hearing the voices and
Mhm.
doing readings and going. I mean, I Ouija board everywhere when I was a teenager. I am so into receiving the spirit. And
Mhm.
I do have a good spell book. I don't,
Mhm.
I never really put much into the fact that it could really work. I do remember though, because my book is called the Good Magic Book of Spells,
Okay.
and I remember I never had anything they actually had for the spell though. So I always used to come up with a substitute, like, well, I don't know, maybe parsley will work for dovetail or
Yeah.
something. And I kept thinking of it more as like a law of attraction that if you're just bringing about the energy, you're going to experience this in your life and you're going to feel like your spell was achieved. Boy, do I wish some of them really did work though. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I've gone out on the beach under a full moon or two and seen some pixies and some fairies. Absolutely drumming up some fairies and have amazing photographs of fairies that I have captured before. So that I absolutely believe in.
Mhm.
So how does one become a witch?
Um, so for me, there was somebody in my family who studied Wicca. She's not able to give consent. She's no longer with us, so she's not able to give consent of who she is. But there was somebody in my family who studied Wicca, and I reached out to her, and she basically told me she knew this day was coming. This goes back to you don't choose Wicca, it chooses you.
Right. Long lineage. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it was one of those things. I started having very strange dreams, and I've always been sensitive to the other side. I have always been connected to the other side. I've had dreams about angels. I've had not only angels come to me, I've had ancestors come to me in dreams. I've had prophetic dreams for as long as I can remember. And sometimes it's dumb stuff. Sometimes it's like, I know what my boyfriend's going to have for lunch in 3 days. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not anything useful, but sometimes it is. So I was well aware that this was happening when I was younger. And basically what happened is I talked to her about what was happening, and she had already found some resources near me that I could go to. I went and and this story is going to sound absolutely unhinged, okay, when I tell this, but whatever. This is the
You're in good
spiritual
company.
podcast, so where else can I tell it, right?
You're in good
So
company.
yeah, so I walked into the metaphysical supply shop that's closest to where I was living in Somerville. And I walked in, and the person looked at me, the person worked behind the counter, and they said, Laura. And I said, yeah, I'd never met this person in my life. Walked over, put some hematite in my hand, closed it around me, and he said, we've been waiting for you, and your energy is all over the place. For the love of God, please just hold that while you're in here. And I called this person, my family member, and I said, did you call them before I went down there today? And she said, no, I only Googled like where they were, had never talked to these people, nothing. Like, this person knew my name, knew who I was, had never seen them in my life. And I walked in, they said, we've been waiting for you. And gave me a spell book, kind of set me up with everything. I started learned from my family member, learned from other people around me, and then just kind of went from there. And it goes into every facet of your life. It goes into how you treat people, because we have what's called the law of threefold. Basically, whatever you do comes back to you threefold, be that good or bad. So it's
Sure.
like karma amplified. And I was already a huge believer in karma prior to converting to Wicca. And people talk about ahimsa a lot, which is an undercurrent in my life as well. But we call it "and harm you none, do what you will" in Wicca. And so there are a few moving pieces to this that are heavily translatable to other things, but it really forces you to look at what you're doing every single day, to every person that you interact with, down to the person that you cut off in traffic, to the person that you say hello to at the gas station, to the cashier at the grocery store. So
Yeah. As it
'cause-
should,
Mhm,
right? Because we're all one. We're all
mhm,
ultimately all one. And so that connection is just unilaterally, we really do need to pay attention.
yeah,
And it's really different religions, or law of attraction, or metaphysics, or the
mhm,
secret, or whatever label we give to these things. Ultimately, except for the nuances of the variances,
mhm,
us, the good witches, are all saying the good thing, the same thing, right? The good people. Even Dr. Masaru Emoto, who was a famous Japanese scientist who proved that through the power and tension of positive speaking and prayer, you can convert dirty lakes into clean drinking, potable drinking water. We know when we talk to our plants, they absolutely thrive and get better. There's been the rice experiments where they put rice in clean water and say positive things, and rice in clean water and say negative things, and you get big fluffy rice compared to drawn out red awful rices. So there's so many examples of the power of positivity and speaking, again, either law of attraction, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you,
mhm,
karma, whatever we're going to label it.
yeah.
So it's all, just great. Is there do you have organized meetings? Like, can you join groups that are local to be able to have camaraderie amongst your peers, or is it hard to find other? How do you find out like that somebody's also practicing Wicca so you can connect?
You totally can if you want to. There are groups on Facebook where people can connect. My grand or my the person in my family actually attended a Unitarian Universalist church because they're very accepting of earth religions there, and Wicca is an earth-based religion. Um, so you could do something like that. Um, I am a solo practitioner, and so sometimes I will work with other people if I know that they're also Wiccan. And sometimes it's down to like a party during solstice. You know what I mean? Let's go celebrate. My old roommate actually was Wiccan. And so, she and I would do things together sometimes. Honestly, we kind of find each other. You can
Mhm.
sort of it's very weird. You can sort of pick up on that energy with people, um, especially women,
Yeah,
especially
it's
women.
true. Yeah.
And
I
it's
run into I run into so many people down by the water or down by the beach. You find so many other spiritualists and all different selections. I'd been going a couple of times to this Japanese light energy thing where they have the same thing. Like on the first of the month, they have this big practice and they come and they worship in these people's homes that have these little altars that they've set up with figurines. I don't know enough about it, but same, they're holding court, right? They're holding honor to the space, but what is it really about at the end of the day? It's people getting together and sharing good positivity and trying to raise the vibration of that energy in the
Mhm,
universe so that we're all elevating where we operate.
mhm.
I would love to learn more about it. But anyway, so what are the spells like? Have you cast any good spells lately? And do you know if
Um,
they work?
do I do some spell work. It's very draining for me, so I don't do it a ton. And to clarify, there's all sorts of different types of spell work that you can do. I have friends who are excellent at tarot. Like I have a friend who is I mean, she is just a brilliant tarot reader. Tarot is not a gift that I have, just to clarify. I am blessed with claircognizance, but tarot, not my thing.
Yeah.
I have other friends who are herbalists, and I am more of I'm I shouldn't say more of, I am a huge energy person. If you need energy cleared, if you need me to take a look at an aura, if you need energy just pushed around, like
Mm,
I'm good at that. Um, so I do a lot of work like that, not only with like the way I speak about things, whether that's through affirmations or writing. Sometimes it's just the ritualistic thing of like burning a candle, saying a spell, focusing on those things. Um, so there's spell work like that. There's also really simple spell work. Um, like I mean, just affirmations over and over in the car. I can't tell you how many times this sounds so dumb,
yeah.
but I can't tell you how many times
No,
I've
yeah.
been in the car and just said over and over that the traffic's clear, and my waves will drop down from an hour and a half to get to a place because we all know the traffic in Charleston, but from an hour and a half to 45 minutes. And I've been doing that one for years. Need a
Yes.
parking spot, not
The
feeling
parking
great,
spot.
visualize before
Yes.
you get there. I am always the friend with the good parking spot. I might always be late, but I've got the good parking once I get there.
I know what you mean about the parking spot because I work on that one too. And
Mhm,
even yesterday, I lost my computer yesterday and I looked all over the place for it. I'm like, how do you lose your computer? Right. And I'm searching, I'm literally in tears because I've gone everywhere. I went out to the cars, I went to every of the desks, I called the office, I called the striped pig, could not find my computer. And I work off of three computers. And so to bring one somewhere, and then I'm like, okay, I can remember exactly where I was the last time I used it, but I
mhm,
couldn't find it. So Raya's saying to me, "Oh, pray to Saint Anthony." That's a whole Christian Catholic thing. Saint Anthony, please come around. Something is lost and must be found. She's like, if you've given up all hope, that's the only thing you can do is pray to Saint Anthony.
mhm,
So, my old Italian grandmother's aunts, my mother, that they always say Saint Anthony. So I literally broke into the Saint Anthony. And then by the time I finished the whole stanza, I said, check the bag that you were using to go to the office last time. So, sure enough, I don't know where that thought came from, but it wasn't my own. And I went to the bag and I lifted up everything out of the top of the bag. And sure enough, there was the computer in the bottom of the bag. So it's like
Yeah.
I knew I had brought it to the distillery, but yet it was nowhere to be found. I had
Hmm.
never taken it out of the bag. And then I piled the bag filled with stuff. But that thought, I'm walking around for hours crying. Did that thought occur to me? No. As soon as
Hmm.
I finished the St. Anthony prayer, in
Hmm.
my consciousness, look in the bag. And there it
And I,
was.
yeah, and I think that's such a great parallel because I think witchcraft gets a bad rap, right? And you're talking about praying to Saint Anthony. My mother grew up Catholic, so I'm familiar with the Saint Anthony prayer. And you're talking about something like prayer or positive energy or like the spell work that I do, whether that's just something simple or something much larger. Um, and it's all kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
which I think is
It is
really
all the same
interesting.
thing. Of course,
It's
energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply transfers form. Sam is like
exactly.
the conversation today. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm,
I'm
oh,
in. Yeah. So,
and that's another thing you wonder about, like the spirits of animals and what they really know and think. I listened to a podcast yesterday that was about a near death experience, and she said that when she crossed over and had the near death experience, she had a meeting about with all the animals, and they expressed that because they are souls that we shouldn't eat them. And I woke up thinking like, oh, I don't eat a lot of meat to begin with, but
mhm,
and then if I wasn't going to eat meat, it was really for healthy reasons. But then I like heard that, and now it's like weighing on my mind. Like I'm that person that takes a spider and brings it outside
mhm,
because I don't want to kill
same.
it. Any
Yeah.
bug that's in the house, like I capture the stupid palmetto bug cockroaches and I bring them outside.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so bad with wanting to kill them. And then I'm thinking, okay, yeah, we do eat meat. I'm not a judgment. I don't want to go down that road, but it's
Yeah.
weighing on my mind. And the point is, we're all connected souls, right?
Mhm.
And that spirituality, I do feel so bad when I have an instant reaction, like, and I smack a bug or something. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? I could have just picked it up and put it outside. But then
Mhm.
my brother will say, well, you now just killed it because it's an inside bug and now it's not going to survive in the outside anyway. So
Mhm.
then I'm like, you're just doomed. But I
Yeah.
think that heaviness on your heart, that weight on your heart of wanting to do good and to be good to people and carry out, as you said, you carry this accountability, right? Even trifold of how do you treat other people? And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, we all could learn from that lesson. But why is it that some of us carry this heavy weight on our heart and other people just don't care?
I love that you brought that up, um, because this is my theory on it. Hurt people, right? I'll use the example of my father, for instance. My father was not a kind man. There's no two ways around it. And he grew up in an extremely abusive home with two people again who were hurt people. So you're talking about a generational trauma, right? Hurting,
Mhm.
hurting, hurting until you get until essentially a sociopath is created, right? So, and I'm not saying that all people who don't carry that heaviness are sociopaths. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that sometimes people are so deeply traumatized that they can't help but want to hurt others and inflict that pain upon
Right.
others. Yeah, you want other people to commiserate with that pain, to understand the pain that you're feeling. And so you inflict it upon others. And I think that that's almost the natural human reaction, right? Misery loves company,
Yeah.
hurt people, etc. The flip side of that is training ourselves to say, okay, and this is my thing is I've experienced a lot of pain in my life. And so it is now my job, it is now my soul's purpose to eradicate the pain that other people feel. It is, and accepting that like I've hurt people and I can look at that and say, okay, I have harmed people and how can I right those wrongs? And how can I do better going forward? And like I said, that accountability factor. and
Yeah,
saying like, okay, it doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good for me to harm the people around me just because I was harmed, right?
sure.
What does do good is trying to change that pattern and actually do something good in the world and carry myself with a different um I don't know the word I'm looking for
Yeah,
is just a different level of accountability. Yeah.
sure. So what's on the horizon for you now? What are you working on?
Um a few different things. I'm in talks to with NAMI to go into schools and talk about suicide prevention,
Nice.
um, and mental health resources. Um, thank shout out to Miss North Charleston 2023 for
Oh, yeah.
helping me get hooked up with that. Yeah. Um, I'm gonna be doing more comedy. I've got a podcast. I am like looking at starting up. Um, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. Just continuing to work, continuing to make people laugh, and continuing to, you know, write and do good in the world.
So, if we're going to put all of your social and your connections and contact information, if people want to, be able to connect with you and share their story, and I'm sure there will be so many people that resonate
Yeah.
for booking for comedy. How do people go about booking you for comedy?
The best way is always going to be through email or Instagram. Instagram's usually better because I'm a naturally suspicious person. I want to see who you know and what you look like, etc. Sorry. But you can find me on Instagram at Laura M. Dixon, LauramDixon. And just shooting me a DM. I check my messages all the time. That's a great way to do it. And then we can have a conversation via Zoom or something. Or
Where are you performing? I know, of course, the Striped Pig, and then you just
Mhm.
thank you for being wonderful and hilarious for the skirt conference last weekend.
Yeah, you're welcome. In Charleston, I don't think I have anything coming up through the holiday season just yet, except for tonight. I will be performing um, at a place in Mount Pleasant at a private event in Mount Pleasant.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, but you can definitely catch me at the open mics and stuff around Charleston this holiday season, and at the Dinner Detective Mystery Theater during the month of December. I will be there on the. Let me look at my calendar because I don't know what day.
A dinner detective. That
Yes,
sounds fun.
yes. December 3rd, 10th, and 17th. I'll be performing.
That's
So
hilarious. And what is that? What is the dinner detective?
it is an interactive mystery dinner theater.
Oh
So
my gosh. And
mm,
where's that located?
that's in Mount Pleasant.
Mount.
We yes, yeah, we perform out of the Hotel Indigo in Mount Pleasant, so you
Oh,
can
that's
see us there.
awesome. Oh my God,
Yeah,
that sounds like so much fun. I definitely have to check that out. We
yes,
need to do more of that. So we're working on the kitchen at Striped Pigs so that we could have full time, open up to the public, and then have that comedy going routinely. I think we do it like now the second Thursday of every month, and that's been running the last almost a year, I think, at this point.
mhm,
And
yeah,
I hope
wow,
to continue that, but I'd like to have it every week if we could. We still get calls all the time asking for you ladies, so we need to get everybody into the routine and just do it every week. That would be wonderful.
yeah, yeah,
Well, you've got some great nuggets here, Laura, and I appreciate you being so vulnerable and open and candid because it is the way that we change the world. And as we leave this 20th episode of Spiritually Speaking with Pixie Paula, I would like to know what are the words of wisdom that you would like to leave us with last as you take us off of the show?
just be kind to the people around you because it matters. It matters. Um, hold yourself to a much higher level of accountability than the rest of this world holds you to. Um, everything you do matters. And your spirituality doesn't just matter when you're sitting in a church or studying what you need to study. Everything you do matters. Everything from the way you get in your car to the way you drink your coffee to the way you speak to somebody you don't know, it all matters. So that's what I
And it
want people to think about.
matters to me. Thank you so much. You
Yeah.
are a blessing.
Thank you. You're a blessing. Yep. Thank you guys for listening.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radicals, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.